Hey everybody, it is Jonathan Keller from California Family Council and also Joshua Denton, our Washington, D.C. correspondent for California Family Council. Hey Josh, how's it going?
Doing well. Good to be with you, Jonathan.
So you are in a very unique location. You're not around the front because the police were telling us politely that we couldn't stand there, but where are you right now?
So I'm actually standing right behind the back of the Supreme Court, which a lot of people, it's obviously a very unique building, so people will recognize it. But what a lot of people might not know is the quote, which you can't see in the frame, but it says "equal justice under law." The quote is actually transcribed back there. And so that's a very pertinent quote to this time because of the breaking news that just happened yesterday.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm really excited that you're there as CFC's Washington, D.C. correspondent. Obviously, I did a short video yesterday on the breaking news that President Trump has nominated 10th Circuit Judge Neil Gorsuch to fill the seat vacated by the late vacated by the late Justice Antonin Scalia. Sorry, Justice Kennedy, if you're watching. I'm not trying to put you in the grave. Vacated by the late Antonin Scalia. So, Josh, tell us a little bit, just from watching the nomination last night and the speech, what was your initial impression there?
So my initial impression is that this is obviously Gorsuch seems to be a very humble man. First of all, that's one of the key takeaways I got from just watching his speech. He just seemed to be like totally kind of like in awe and very just humbled by this nomination. Yeah. And so I think that that's definitely a really positive thing. That's the thing that really stood out to me the most. And then one other thing that also really stood out to me, if I had to pick two things, would be just a very short phrase, like one sentence that he said, which is basically that it's not the duty of the courts to legislate. We should leave that up to the Congress. And obviously that demonstrates that he really believes in, a strict interpretation of the Constitution. He's not there to legislate from the bench, but he's just there to promote and uphold the principles that the Constitution contains.
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally agree with you. I think that if you get a chance to go back and watch the video of his nomination speech, I heard several people say, including some prominent Never Trump Republicans, they actually thought this was the best moment so far of Trump's presidency. And honestly, I think I'd have to agree. I mean, the speech by him was humble. But remarkably, even the speech by President Trump was, it was very short, sweet. It was to the point. And I actually thought it was maybe the best public speaking, the best speech I've seen him give so far.
Yeah, I would definitely have to concur with you there. It was very, very presidential. Something that many of his critics or previous critics who are starting to come around, I guess you could say, definitely, were worried about him having that character trait. But so far, he is definitely, no one can say that he's not, behaved himself in a presidential way for the most part. Obviously, there are people who are like, when's he going to stop, with these crazy tweets at, 3 a.m. and stuff like that,
Right.
But I think mainly with that's off topic for today. But that's mainly just his way of, going around the media in the way that he's explained it. But yes, so he was very presidential and very gracious. I really liked that he. It was a special moment, I think, because the late Justice Antonin Scalia's wife was there.
Right.
His son was there, Father Scalia. And so afterwards, I actually also learned the news that they actually, after the speech and the announcement of the nomination took place, Justice Scalia's son, the late Justice Antonin Scalia's son, actually led the small crowd there in the White House in prayer. And so that was really encouraging to see, just a very special moment.
And we actually just reshared that photo posted by the Trump White House on the CFC page, and that was just really impressive. And I thought it was actually, again, very gracious, very kind. We've actually not had a vacancy on the Supreme Court due to a death since the death of Judge William Rehnquist back in, I think, 2005. So it's actually been quite a while that we've had kind of that unique situation where a justice has passed away. And I thought it was very, very gracious and very respectful of President Trump to both recognize and kind of call out from the stage Justice Scalia's widow, Maureen Scalia. I thought it was great that President Trump did that. And then also the fact that, as you mentioned, Father Paul Scalia, one of Justice Scalia's, I believe, 9 children.
Yeah, definitely a big family.
A very big Italian Catholic family. But Justice Paul Scalia there with Mrs. Scalia led prayer. And it was a great photo. It was President Trump. It was his 2 sons, Don and Eric. Mike Pence and his wife Karen were there. And Judge Gorsuch and his wife. So I thought it was neat. It was also an interesting point. It didn't really get much play yet, but Josh, you and I both are evangelical Christians, and it was just kind of a neat thing to see that Judge Gorsuch is actually he's not an evangelical per se, but he is Protestant.
Yes.
And this is actually, people don't know, but the last time that we had a Protestant, non-Catholic, non-Jewish individual on the court was David Souter. So the last time one of a non-Catholic or non-Jewish member of the court was nominated was way back in 1991. So this was kind of a unique opportunity.
Yes, yeah, definitely. So that's just kind of you mentioned some fun facts there about Judge Gorsuch. Another fun fact about him is that if he is confirmed, that he will be the first former law clerk to serve on the bench alongside his old boss.
That's right.
So that's something that hasn't taken place. And then you mentioned, of course, he right now there's no other Protestant on the court. So it's just he's definitely got a unique background. It's very, very solid, and it's gonna be very exciting to see what happens.
I was also really touched. Obviously, we know that he is friends with Judge Anthony Kennedy, who you mentioned, and that's the Supreme Court justice that he had clerked for.
Yes.
But he also was very close, actually, with Justice Scalia himself. There's a really fun photo that came out yesterday of Judge Gorsuch actually on a fishing trip in Colorado with Justice Scalia. And
yes.
I had actually read in advance of the appointment that Judge Gorsuch was so friendly and so greatly respected Justice Scalia that he actually wept when he heard the news that he had passed away. And I think you actually saw that yesterday. If you go back and you watch the announcement, the speech from Judge Gorsuch, when he mentions Justice Scalia, and he says that he says basically, I paraphrasing a little bit, but he says, I could never really hope to fill his shoes. He says, Justice Scalia was a lion of the law. And when he says that, you can tell he actually gets a little choked up, and he kind of...
Yes, I noticed that as well.
He has to kind of catch himself, because I think a lot of times for those of us, me out here in California, and even you in D.C., I think a lot of times we don't realize really what an impact Justice Scalia had on conservative constitutional jurists like Judge Gorsuch.
Yes, yeah, that's definitely true. And I did notice that moment as well when he got a little choked up, just recalling the memory and the legacy, in fact, of the late Justice Antonin Scalia. So those things, like you mentioned, are going to be those are very good signs that we know without a doubt, he's going to do a terrific job if he's confirmed. Many of the audience of California Family Council was familiar with Professor Robbie George, the McCormick professor at Princeton University, and he's just a phenomenal thinker, very acclaimed, widely acclaimed in social conservative movement, and many for him to come out in praise of Judge Gorsuch is in itself like a very strong support for many evangelicals, many conservatives, and I remember that Professor Robbie George basically he said that Gorsuch would make a terrific, superb Supreme Court justice, called him intellectually gifted and just extremely talented. And so that means a lot, definitely coming from such a great mind as Professor George.
Absolutely. And I'm very excited about that. And as we're just wrapping up here, the one big question is, now the nomination has been made, but can the Republicans get this through a very divided, very contentious confirmation process? I hate to say it, I was talking with some of my friends on the left, and one of my friends, we obviously disagree on policy issues, but I really respect him and his view of the political process. He said, I don't think you understand how angry still a lot of my friends and a lot of my fellow liberals are about the fact that you guys stopped Judge Merrick Garland. And he said, in our mind, we actually view this as a stolen seat. And I think that, unfortunately, that's going to make this confirmation process much more contentious. It may actually be the most contentious Supreme Court confirmation since either Justice Clarence Thomas or even Justice or Judge Robert Bork before that. So based on what you're seeing there on the ground and what you've read and heard, what do you think the chances are of this actually getting through the Senate?
I think it will get through the Senate. I think it may just take a little more time than it typically takes, as we've seen, like with former Senator Jeff Sessions, and the amount of time it took for his confirmation, which basically, has been postponed and everything like that. So, his went through, and Rex Tillerson just got approval, and their confirmation. I mean, this confirmation has been a while in coming. Their hearing started like at least 2 weeks ago. So I think it will happen. I just think it's going to be, like you said, a kind of grueling process. Probably more bickering and contention going on throughout the process. But I think overall it will happen. I know some conservatives have, threatened to bring out, all that it takes and pull out all the stops to make sure that it happens. Fact yet remains to be seen. But overall, I'm definitely very optimistic that it will actually occur.
And I am grateful on that note. I know that Mitch McConnell, Senate Majority Leader, on both Hugh Hewitt's show this morning and then on several other shows, was asked specifically, will you invoke the nuclear option, the so-called nuclear option, and break the filibuster?
Yes.
And he basically said, Judge Gorsuch is going to be confirmed. And it was kind of funny, but they asked me, so you're saying you will use it? And he says, all I'm saying is that Judge Gorsuch will be confirmed. So. Yeah. I'm grateful for that, because obviously that's what the people voted for. And in closing, that's one thing that I do want to point out for any of our friends who maybe wonder, well, what about that, complaint on the left? Is this a stolen seat? Is this an illegitimate Supreme Court nomination? Well, President Trump made a very good point at the beginning. He said, this has been the most transparent selection process in history.
Exactly.
Judge Gorsuch was on the list of 21 justices. So I think, to his credit, he said he ran on a platform of, these are the types of justices I'm going to appoint. If you want me to appoint one of these 21 justices, vote for me and make me president.
Right.
Hillary Clinton, very plainly, especially in that third debate, she very clearly said, I think that not only should Roe v. Wade be kept, but I actually think that we should get rid of the Hyde Amendment. We should now have unrestricted taxpayer funding for abortions.
Yes.
That was on the ballot. The Supreme Court was on the ballot in November.
Yes.
And the voters of this country decided that they wanted President Trump, instead of Secretary Clinton, to be picking the Supreme Court justice. So I think that, as much as we don't want to be grandstanding, we don't want to gloat, and we don't want to certainly rub our friends' faces in it, the fact that the people picked President Trump, I think we also should be respectful and say, this is what the people voted for, and we need to honor and respect the results of the election and give the people what they asked for and what they voted for.
Yep. I wholeheartedly agree with you. Like you said, both of them were very clear from the outset, pretty much, for very many months, about what they intended to do, what types of legislation they intended to promote and pursue, and what the Supreme Court pick became a very big issue after the death of the late Justice Antonin Scalia. And both of them were very open and transparent about saying, hey, this is the kind of justice I'm going to promote, and like you said, or nominate. And like you said, the people made their choice.
Right. Well, and I'm grateful for you being out there and giving us the report. I know there were some protests there yesterday at the court already, so we didn't do this video last night because we didn't want to get caught up in all the craziness of all the protests. But it's nice that you can be there reporting for us today. And folks, if you're wondering, we're going to actually have probably more reports like this with Joshua going out there, whether it's at the Supreme Court, whether it's at the Capitol. Maybe, probably not the White House, but we'll see. But
we'll see.
You might even occasionally have some special surprise guests from some of our friends there in Washington, whether it's a congressman or might be some of our friends from one of the many great Washington-based groups like Family Research Council or Susan B. Anthony List or Alliance Defending Freedom. So we're really happy to have Josh back there, and also, of course, we appreciate your financial support as we're continuing the work of California Family Council, both here in the Golden State and back in our nation's capital. So, Josh, again, thanks for being with us, and look forward to talking to you again real soon.
All right. Talk to you later, Jonathan.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone. Talk to you again soon.